Good morning, everyone. On behalf of MCNC, I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar where we'll be talking about the newest service offering in our security services portfolio, and that is our continuous monitoring and risk assessment service. My name is Chris Beal, and I am the Chief Information Security Officer at MCNC, and we're really excited that you're all here this morning, and we're excited to talk about this new service. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. I've put the agenda for today's presentation up on the screen. So we're going to start out with a little bit of history about how we got to this point with having this service available, what caused us to want to develop this service, some of the process that we went through in bringing it to where we're at. And then we will do an overview of the service, describe what it is, what the components are, and how they work together to deliver the service to you. And then we will break out of the slides and jump into the web browser and have a live demonstration of what the service looks like inside the web portal, walk you through the features and the functionality and show you exactly how it works. And then we'll pop back out of the demo, back to the slides to cover a few additional details about how the service is delivered to you. And then we will have an opportunity at the end to cover questions and answers. And we are having an issue, it appears, with the chat functionality here in Zoom. So I will ask, if you have questions, do not type them in the chat window, but instead send them to that email address that you see at the bottom of your screen there, securityservices@mcnc.org. All the lines are muted throughout the presentation today. So if you have any questions throughout, please send them to that email address. We have someone monitoring that. We'll pick them up. And when we get to the Q&A portion of the webinar today, then we will do our very best to answer those questions. And then if we are not able to answer them on the webinar, we'll have your email address and we can follow up with an answer for you there. So that's our agenda for today. So we're going to dive right in and talk about the continuous monitoring and risk assessment service. So what this service is at a high level is MCNC is operating vulnerability scanning infrastructure residing in our data centers, and we will use that scanning infrastructure to scan your external network perimeter. We will discover IP addresses and devices that we can see. We will determine what services those devices are presenting to the outside world, and we will look for the presence of any vulnerabilities, whether that is out-of-date software or misconfigured services running on those systems, or anything that an attacker might be able to exploit in order to compromise your infrastructure. So we will do all of that scanning, and we will set that up, and we will do it on an automated, recurring basis. Then we will take the results of those scans and we will feed them into a tool from a company called Kenna Security. And the Kenna tool presents your vulnerability information in a web-based dashboard. And the secret sauce that they bring to this is they have algorithms that calculate risk scores for the vulnerabilities that exist in your environment. So what Kenna's algorithms are looking at are things like which vulnerabilities are attackers successfully exploiting in real-world data breaches? Which vulnerabilities have malware that exists that's trying to take advantage of them? How easy is an exploit or a vulnerability to exploit, or how hard is it to exploit? All of those kind of things factor into calculating how risky a particular vulnerability is for your environment. So when you log into your portal, you see your specific vulnerabilities and you see calculated risk scores. And what the risk scores tell you, if you sort based on the risk scores, if you start with the highest risk scores, those are the things that you need to focus on fixing first in your environment. So we'll talk a bit about why MCNC is offering this service. This is something that MCNC has been doing for a while in our own vulnerability management program for managing our network infrastructure. We started using the Kenna Security tool several years ago, and what we found is that when we started using this tool, we stopped logging into the vulnerability scanner really other than to just configure scans. So all of our interaction with the results of our vulnerability scans was happening inside of the Kenna web-based dashboard. So we thought, well, that's a pretty powerful and valuable tool. And so one of the things that you'll see when we go to the demo is Kenna also offers a lot of nice dashboarding functionality, report information, trending information. And we use a lot of information out of those reports to present updates on our risk posture to MCNC's advisory council and board of directors. And those folks are our customers as well. And so when we started doing that, those groups were saying to us, wow, that's really neat. Is that something that you could do for us or make available to us? And so we started looking at what it would take for us to offer this as a service to customers. And we've spent the last year or so doing development work and packaging all of this up. And we're now at a point where we're ready to make this available to customers. So that's a little history on how we got to the point that we're at. So I'm going to show you this in more detail when we do the demo, but this is what it looks like when you log into your dashboard. You start with this screen here that shows you your assets and your vulnerabilities, and you can click around to get additional information about those. And you can see in the top right corner, there's a risk score that's calculated there. When you drill down into specific vulnerabilities, you can get more detail about what those vulnerabilities are. And then here's a screenshot of what some of the dashboarding and trend reporting looks like, where you can take a look at what your risk scores look like over time, and are you improving or declining. And so those are nice things that you can use to get a handle on what your risk posture looks like. So we're going to pop over into the demo at this point. Right. So this is what the Kenna dashboard looks like. And when you log in by default, you're looking at your assets. So what we've got here, this is a list of all the servers that are being scanned by the vulnerability scanner that currently have some vulnerabilities on them. And over here in the right-hand corner, you can see there's this aggregate risk score. So the risk scores are calculated on a 0 to 1,000 scale, where 1,000 is the highest risk and 0 is the lowest risk. So this particular set of assets that we're looking at is somewhere in the middle, 460. So that's, a view of the risk scores here. And so I can see this particular asset right here, the host6 DMZ example.edu has a risk score of 1,000. So what that's telling me is that this host is particularly risky. And so if I want to see why that host is considered risky, I can come over here to the little blue arrow and click on that, and it will pop up the details of the vulnerabilities that exist on that particular host. So I can see here there's a list of vulnerabilities. The first one is rated as a 100. So the individual vulnerabilities are scored on a 0 to 100 scale. So this is the highest risk vulnerability, and it's telling me this is CVE 2013-1493, and that's a color management vulnerability in Oracle Java SE7. So if I want further details on that particular vulnerability, I can click the blue arrow. And this again is the description of the vulnerability. I can click on the Fix tab at the top, and it will give me details of this particular vulnerability and how I can go about fixing it. Here's a security advisory I can click on, additional links I can click on to get more information about patching this vulnerability. I'm also told at the top that there are at least 38 known exploits that are targeting this particular vulnerability. And so I can click on these to get additional information about them. And this other tab at the top is known malware. So it's telling me that there's also over 1,800 known malware samples that are targeting this particular vulnerability. So that's the reason that this particular vulnerability is considered such a high risk. There's a lot of malware that's exploiting it. There are a lot of different known exploits for it, and it is particularly troublesome to deal with because it does cause remote code execution. And so that's why this one is so high. So that's one that's listed here. You can see there are several others that are listed, varying degrees of riskiness that are all impacting this particular host. So I go back to my asset list. You can see there are several other assets here. I could drill into them as well to get additional details. If I click on the vulnerabilities tab here, instead of sorting by assets, I'm now sorting by vulnerabilities. So this one is a vulnerability that we just looked at, and they're sorted in order of their riskiness. So you can see there, if I want the additional details on them, I can click on the blue arrow, and I get that this one is a server IKE v1 implementation in Cisco iOS. If I click on the fix, it tells me here's the information about this particular vulnerability. I could click on this link to go to Cisco's site to get additional information. And there are 2 known exploits that are targeting this particular vulnerability. So really what I've got here inside of this tool are a list of systems, and it's prioritized based on risk, and I can drill into the details to understand why these particular vulnerabilities are present on this system and how to go about fixing them. There's also a concept inside of this tool of dashboards or groups. And so if I click on the dashboard tab at the top, I can see the different groups that I've created. So this is what we were looking at before for all assets. This is just my systems that I have classified as database servers. These are the systems that I have classified as my DMZ servers. These are my Linux systems, my network devices, my Windows servers. So you can group assets in your environment in any way that you want to, and assets can exist in multiple different groups. So that's something that the tool makes available to you. If I look at this, we'll take the Linux one as an example. I can click on the reporting tab here. And this is where I get the executive trending information that I was talking about earlier. This is an overview of this particular group that we've called Linux. There are 12 assets in this group. There are 30 vulnerabilities that exist across those assets. This is a pretty new group, and so there's not a lot of interesting information on the trend line. But over time, as I am finding vulnerabilities and fixing them, and my risk scores go up and go down, this trend line becomes a lot more interesting. But just wanted to give you a view of some of the charts and graphs that are available to you inside of this tool. You can chart your total assets and vulnerabilities over time, your active assets and open vulnerabilities over time. There's a lot of information here about the vulnerabilities that exist by risk level. So I've got 21 low risk vulnerabilities, 9 medium risk, and 0 high risk inside of this Linux group that we're looking at. This is the Linux group, so these are all Linux systems, so vulnerabilities by operating system. They're all Linux, but they're different flavors of Linux that you can see listed there. Vulnerabilities by score, number of fixes available per asset, number of unique CVEs. So all of this information is available to you inside of the reporting dashboards that are listed here. So we'll go back to the main screen. You can see at the top there's some kind of pre-built ways to look at the data that is being presented to you. The first one is top priority. So these are the things that Kenna, based on their algorithms, believes should be your top priority for remediation. This active net breaches are vulnerabilities that Kenna knows are actively being used in real-world data breaches. Easily exploitable, these are the vulnerabilities that are known to be very easy to exploit that exist in your environment. Malware exploitable are the vulnerabilities that are known to have malware that is currently targeting them. Popular targets are ones that are seen targeted quite a bit in, again, real world activity. So all of this information here is available to you through the tool, and you could click on that if I wanted to know which ones were the ones that were malware exploitable. It comes back with these two specific vulnerabilities that have active malware that is exploiting those. The tool also offers some other ways to filter data here over on the right-hand side of your screen. You can sort by risk score or different CVSS scores. So if I only wanted to see the vulnerabilities that were present in my environment that were considered high risk, I could change this slider over to the 70 tab. And now I'm only looking at vulnerabilities that score between 70 and 100. So I'm only looking at the very high risk ones for my environment. So you can use these tools to change the way the data is displayed here. If we take a look at asset filters, I could say, show me only these are groups that we have created that we saw on the dashboard screen earlier. So I could say, show only my firewalls. I could check that box, and it's only showing me vulnerability information related to my firewalls. There's also ways to filter based on these parameters. If I was only interested in seeing the Ubuntu devices, I could check that box, and now I'm only getting results related to Ubuntu. If I only wanted to see devices that were listening on certain ports, all the discovered ports are available here. I could say only show me devices listening on port 80, and now that list is trimmed down to just those particular devices. So lots of ways to filter the data, all available here. There's also a very handy search feature, and there's an entire search syntax that you can learn. So if I wanted to look at just a particular IP address, I could type in IP colon and then the IP. And you can see that it's filtered to just this one asset, which is this particular IP address. And so now I'm only looking at that one device. Similarly, I could look at filter or search based on a particular CVE. And now it's only showing me that particular CVE, and I could click on the Assets tab to see which devices in my environment are vulnerable to that specific CVE. So you can search that way. Lots of ways to search. I could search based on a number of things. If I click the little help screen here, it brings up a context menu that shows me how to use the syntax for searching, and I could click on this link for a full list of parameters, and then there's another link here that will take you to a page with examples. So all this is available to you right inside of the tool. One of the things that we'll talk about is ways to get data into this system. So by default, MCNC will be scanning your environment from the vulnerability scanners that run in our data centers. But if you are already running your own vulnerability scanners and you're collecting that data yourself, and you would like to get that data into this Kenna tool, Kenna has ways to do that as well. Click on the Connectors tab, and you can add a connector, and you can see here Kenna has pre-built connectors for all of these different vulnerability scanning and security information collection tools. So all of this is available to you right out of the box. If you're already running one of these tools and you want to get the data in there, you can do that. And if you're running a tool that you don't see listed here, we can talk with you about ways to use Kenna's API or to work with Kenna to get them to develop a connector for data that you would like to get inside of this tool. The tool also offers some alerting functionality. So we can go to the alerts page, and you can turn on these different types of alerts. So the tool will send you an email alert when these events happen. So if your risk meter changes, it goes up or goes down, you can turn on the email alert, and you will get an email letting you know that that happened. If there are new active internet breaches identified in your data set, new popular vulnerabilities, new easily exploitable vulnerabilities, new top priority vulnerabilities, new malware vulnerabilities, all of those you can turn on, and when the scan runs, if it finds one of those that is existing in your environment that wasn't existing before, you can get an email alert so you can know that there's something that you need to come take a look at. Also, other types of alerts, if the data synchronization failed, or if it succeeded, or these other things happen, you can turn on those alerts as well. So you can get alerted by the tool. So I think that is most of what I wanted to cover within the tool. And again, we'll have lots of time towards the end to take questions. So if you have a specific question about something you saw in the demo, we can absolutely come back and talk about that. Yeah. And again, just a reminder, if you do have questions, please email those to the securityservices@mcnc.org email address. So this tool, again, we're calling continuous monitoring and risk assessment. There is no hardware or software for you to deploy or manage. The scanning of the vulnerabilities for your environment is fully managed by us. If you've ever operated a vulnerability management program, you know that the scanning piece can be difficult to configure and maintain. So we're taking care of that for you. The scans are configured up front and fully automated. By default, we will scan your network perimeter every week. If you would like to talk to us about changing the cadence of that, we can absolutely discuss that with you. If you'd like it to be less frequent or more frequent or done on some kind of different frequency, we can talk with you about that and figure out a cadence that works for you. So because those scans do happen on a weekly basis or a recurring basis, and it is fully automated, every time you log into your risk portal, you are getting the most currently updated view of your risk posture. You don't have to go off and worry about rescanning something. The scan happens automatically. So you log in, you see there's an issue that needs taken care of, you go apply the patch or change the configuration, and the scan runs automatically. So the next time that happens, if the issue has been corrected, it's no longer in your list of issues, and so your risk score changes automatically. Again, the risk scores tell you what to fix first. You prioritize based on risk score and start at the top, and those are the issues based on the real world data that you should be working on fixing first. And again, you can click on the details within the particular vulnerability, and it will tell you how to fix that issue. And you also, again, get the executive reporting dashboards that you got a view of there, which are very helpful in dealing with executives and working on trying to get resources prioritized to fix the things that you need to fix in your environment. So phase one of this service, which is what we're in now, we are providing scanning for your external network presence. So again, that is what we can see from our data centers about your network. That's also what attackers will be able to see from the outside. We are planning a second phase for this service, which will come to life sometime in 2019, where we will offer an ability to scan your internal network. We're still in the early planning stages for that, so I can't tell you exactly what that will look like. But what we're envisioning is some kind of hardware or software device that you can install on your internal network that will scan your internal network and will feed the resulting scan data back up into your risk portal. So that's something that will be coming in the future, but is not available today. But as we talked about, if you are already performing vulnerability scanning on your internal network and you are interested in getting that data into the Kenna portal, absolutely that's something that can happen. We'll just need to talk with you about the scanner that you're using and work on doing that data integration, but it should be relatively straightforward. This service is live and available now. We have about 12 customers that we've been working with for several months through our beta testing process. And just in the last 2 weeks, we've added on 6 or 8 more, and we're planning to add several more on in the next few weeks. And so we've got lots of customers who have been using this for a while and will be rolling onto it soon. So if this is something that you're interested in, it's not something that you need to wait for. We can get you up and running as soon as you're ready. So let's talk a little bit about pricing for this service. So there are really 2 ways to purchase this service. The first is what we're calling the base pack, and that includes the managed vulnerability scanning service, access to your Kenna web portal, which is what we were looking at in the demo, which has all the risk scoring and the reporting and the information on how to fix services. And it includes continuous scanning for up to 100 IP addresses. So for most of our customers, that should be enough to cover scanning their external network perimeter. We realize that there are customers who have many, many more IPs on their perimeter than 100, but a good chunk of the customer base that we serve has fewer than 100. So for most folks, the base pack will be all you need in the initial scanning stages for your external network perimeter. So the cost for the base pack is $2,500 per year. So that gets you everything that you see on the screen there. Now, if you need more than 100 IP addresses, we sell add-on packs, and we sell those in groups of 100 IPs. And so if you do need more than 100, you can purchase the number of add-on packs that you need to get you to the number of IPs that you need for scanning. And those add-on packs start at $786 per year for a pack of 100 IPs. But we do have volume discounts available. So if you're buying more than 100, your price for the add-on packs will go down significantly based on your volume. So that's what the pricing looks like. Relatively straightforward. I did mention earlier that we have several customers who are already running with this service. So I just wanted to give you some information that we've heard from those customers. This customer told us that the information was very helpful, and they're already turning it into actionable items to improve their security posture. So this was after about a week of using it, they already had information that they could use on the ground to go make improvements for their perimeter security. So that's exactly what we want to hear. That's why we're offering this service. And we hope that if you take advantage of this service, that you will fall in the same boat. Now, I did want to mention here in terms of pricing for our K-12 community. So any folks that are in the public K-12 space, charter schools or LEAs, this service is available to you at no additional cost to you because it's being funded by DPI, North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So if you fall into that category and you're wondering about cost, you don't need to worry about that. You just need to contact us and say, hey, I want to get up and running on this because it's something that, again, is available to you at no cost because it's being funded through DPI. So if you have any questions about that, again, we'll be happy to talk to you about that as well. So that brings us to the Q&A portion of the session. So I've got lots of questions coming in via email, so we will take a moment and answer one of those. So the first question is, if you don't have many assets in the home screen, does that mean there are no risks detected or that the scan is not seeing all assets? For example, my school only sees 2 assets at this point. And so it's a twofold question there. Only assets that contain vulnerabilities will show up in that home screen by default. And that's because there's a default filter that's applied to say, show me only active vulnerabilities. If you would like to see all assets in the home screen all the time, you can change that filter to say, show me all assets, even ones that are inactive from a vulnerability standpoint. And that way you can ensure that you're always seeing everything that the scanner is able to see. For most folks, they only want to see the things that have issues that they need to take some action on. And so that's why that's the default view. So that's the short answer to that question. So you can choose how you would like to see on that home screen If you have a specific question about your specific scanning environment, we would talk with you about that during the initial setup. The initial setup of the service, we will do some test scans, and we usually have to go through some tuning to make sure that we're seeing all the data that you want to see and get it set up the way you want it to be. So that would be part of the onboarding of the service to make sure that it's configured the way you want it to be. So the next question we have is, we run Nexpose because it has an authenticated scan where it logs into a service account and runs queries on the system. As such, it gets a complete picture of installed software. What type of scans is Kenna doing? So that is an excellent question. The first point I will make about that is Kenna is not doing any scanning. Kenna is only the data display component of this service. The scanning that we are doing in phase 1 is done with a scanner called OpenVAS, and that scan is unauthenticated. So this in phase 1 is just a scan of what we can see from the network perimeter as the unprivileged outsider. So this would be what an attacker would be able to see from the outside. So in phase 1, we are not doing any authenticated scans. With phase 2, again, we will be looking to have something that we can deploy more closely to your internal network, and that is where we will talk about the option for doing authenticated scans. As I mentioned, we're still in the design stage of what phase 2 will look like, and so I can't commit to you as to whether or not what we deploy in phase 2 will offer authenticated scanning, but it is certainly something that we are considering at this point. But I will also say, if you're using Nexpose and you're doing authenticated scanning, there is a pre-built connector in the Kenna tool for Rapid7's Nexpose. So if you're interested in getting that data that you already have into Kenna to do the risk scoring and analysis on, that should be a relatively simple thing to do. We have done a lot of testing with data connectors, and Kenna has lots of folks who are using Nexpose for vulnerability scanning, so that should be something where we could take your existing scan data and pump it in there, and you would have the advantage of seeing that authenticated scan data that you already have. The next question I have is, what do you need from me in order to give me a quote for the service? That is an excellent question, and we have on our website that you see listed here, service details available here, www.mcnc.org/services/CMRA. If you go to that page, it has full details about this service, lots of the things that we've just covered in the presentation. This recording of this webinar will also be posted there on that site once the webinar is finished. And down at the bottom of that page, you will see a link that says submit a web request. If you click on that link, you'll be taken to a form that asks you for a couple of pieces of information, and that's what we need to collect from you in order to get a quote over to you. So that's basically, we need to know the number of IP addresses that will need to be included, and we'll normally do a discovery scan first so we can verify what we're seeing there. And tell you, here's the number of IPs that we see, and we'll have you confirm that. And then we'll use that information to give you the quote. Alternatively, you can also just send an email to securityservices@mcnc.org and ask us to give you a quote, and we'll be happy to reach out and prepare that for you. Another question, several questions that have come in. The first one is there an API packages included? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Kenna has a very robust API that you can program against in order to pump data in and pull data out and do analysis on it externally. We are using that API to move the scan data from the scans that we conduct into your Kenna portal. So there's full documentation available on that, and we can follow up and send you a link to that documentation on their API, but it is very robust. The next question is, how granular does the reporting get? So I can pull the demo back up here. So I'm not sure exactly how to answer that question because I'm not sure what you're looking for. I can show you again the dashboard reporting that's listed there. There's a lot of stuff that's available. And you can export any of and all of this out to PDF and also to CSV if you're interested in that. And then you can also use their API to pull the data out. But again, you can see here what you're looking at, risk scores over time, total assets and vulnerabilities over time, active assets and open vulnerabilities over time, active assets by risk level, open vulnerabilities by risk level, operating system, asset tag. So it is pretty granular in what you can view here. And again, you can export it out in various different formats or pull it out via the API if you would like to report on it in a different manner. There's a question, does it integrate with ticketing systems? There is some integration that is built here in the connectors. I know ServiceNow is listed there. And I believe there are some other ticketing here, Jira, Remedy, Cheerwell, and ServiceNow. So there are pre-built configurations for those for getting data out of here and also pumping data in. So those exist. I don't have a tremendous amount of detail because we have not tested those, but Kenna has very good documentation. So if that's something you're interested in, we could send you that documentation and certainly follow up with Kenna on any specific questions that you have. And then there is a question that says, what is the disaster recovery plan like? So the nice thing about this service is that the scans are discrete. So if a particular scan dies in the middle or flakes out, and the data that appears as a result of that scan is something's wrong with it, it's a very simple thing for us to rescan and re-import. All of our scanning infrastructure is backed up in MCNC's data centers. It is redundant. We're actually using Docker containers to run the scanners. So there's not a monolithic infrastructure that we have to maintain. We actually spin up the containers on demand when it's time to run your scan. The scan runs, the data is exported out via XML, and then the container is thrown away. So the infrastructure for the scanning is actually very dynamic and elastic, scales up and down, and we could run that in lots of different places. We just happen to run it out of our data centers, and our data centers we're SOC 2, Type 2 compliant, and we have backup and redundant data centers. So this service will be very fault tolerant from a scanning perspective. Kenna's platform is entirely cloud-based. We could get you additional details on their redundancy and failover, but part of the reason we have chosen them is that, again, their platform is scalable and available in the cloud, and so they have a lot of redundancy and DR continuity measures in place behind the scenes to be able to make sure their platform is up and running. And again, I don't have all the details on this, but we do know from working with Kenna's account team that Kenna is in use by many very large Fortune 1000 organizations across the globe. And so, their infrastructure is scaled to help support those types of customers. So if you have specific questions about that, we will be happy to work with Kenna to get answers for you there. The next question is, are you using this service to monitor PowerSchool and NC Test? And the answer to that question is no. We would be happy to do that. We probably need to work with the folks who own those applications. I don't think that's something we would want every one of our K-12's customers to be scanning individually. I doubt PowerSchool and NC Test would appreciate that. But if we did have a way to centralize monitoring of those, that's absolutely something that we could do. All right, let's see if we have any other questions that have come in. Okay, I don't see any other ones in the mailbox at this time. So I think that, jump back here, I think that is everything that we wanted to cover in the webinar today. Again, you guys have the link to the page there, mcnc.org/services/CMRA. That will have all the details about the service and the recording of this webinar if you'd like to go back and look at it. If you're interested in a quote, you on the bottom of that page, you click on the Submit a Web Request button. And then also you have the security services at mcnc.org email address where you can send any follow-up questions. If you want to take it for a test spin yourself, we have a canned demo environment that we can give you access to, or we can set up a scan of your environment and allow you to have access to the data that's there for up to 30 days, where you can demo it and decide if it's something that you think you'd like to take advantage of. But we'd love to talk to you, get your feedback, see how it works for you, and hopefully it's something that you find valuable for monitoring and improving your security posture. So with that, I thank you all very much for attending the webinar today. We appreciate your interest in MCNC and what we're doing with security services. So again, thank you, and we'll talk to you soon.